No, you know, it's really, looking back over the past 3 years, I just reflected on what were the 3 or 4 things that really got us involved in this. And I think creating the urgency, you know, how did we set the stage, how do we create the environment to make this happen? And I would attribute the initial stages of that to our involvement in Achieving the Dream. And that's because that got us into a data-driven, statewide community college system. We really started to look at our data, and we found the same things that others have talked about. We were shocked, absolutely shocked at how poorly we were doing in the area of remediation. Then we were fortunate enough to steal an expert from Tennessee, thank you, Tennessee, to lead our remedial projects just statewide. And I think that was a very important hire. Because we needed to create a hierarchy of such to show that remediation was so important to us that we needed somebody centrally to just manage all those projects. I want to thank our Commission for Higher Education because we were awarded a CCA grant that they managed, and they involved us in that partnership. That allowed us to run our pilots, and we found that CoRec was the one that came to the top. And then I took that to our board. And again, this was the whole thing was strategic. These things didn't just happen. I took it to the board because I wanted our state board to endorse this as Ivy Tech's very first best practice. They were just starting to endorse practices across the state that they wanted and supported being going to scale, and I wanted this to be the first one. So now we have documented in one of our resolutions that this is the very first best practice that was endorsed by our state board. Okay, so just real briefly what our model, and I could spend hours on this. When Bruce said just one slide, I thought, oh my gosh, okay, I'll try. So this is really what our model is like. We developed our math pathways at the same time we redid our remedial curriculum. So the two, and I don't even know how we could have separated the two. But we developed 3 pathways with the help of the Dana Center. Amy Getz is a hero in my book, along with, there are a lot of other heroes, but Amy's at the top. She really helped and this again was a faculty-driven project. Amy was a tremendous help, other consultants were, but it was the faculty that had to do the work. We did not take something and duplicate it or replicate it in Indiana. And our remedial content and the way it's delivered varies with each of the 3 pathways. In the old model, everyone did the same remedial regardless of what math they were taking. In the new model, depending on what pathway you want to take, that'll vary the model. So we co-rec with our new major model, quantitative reasoning, and about 50% of the students take that. That's a true co-rec, and we are 100% at scale now with that across the state. Brand new course. And it's very stat heavy. Our tech model that Rob came up and talked to you about, he didn't talk to you about the remedial pathway for that. We call it foundations. We stole that from Tennessee too. Tennessee's a great partner. Maybe unwilling, but thank you, Tennessee, again. So we took that foundations model and we co-rec that with a tech course rather than with the math course because it's reading, writing, and math in one course. So we co-rec it typically with electricity, and that allows the students to kind of get engaged in their credit activity while they're doing remedial. And then they take the tech math right at the very next semester. And then where we need work and where we're looking to you all to help us is we haven't touched the algebra very much in terms of co-recking it. And what we have done is severely reduced the number of students that can get into it. We raised the bar to get into algebra. We want students to go into the other 2 pathways if their algebra if their skill set in algebra is low. There is a way to go, but y'all heard the stats. 1 to 3% of the students starting there actually get through calculus, and we're trying to encourage them for their own benefit not to try that pathway, to get into it another way. But our former, and I love this, we required up to 10 hours of remediation in our former math model, and now it's reduced to 3 credit hours. in a single semester. So we got so many students into SAP issues by repeating. Just imagine that. If you took each remedial course twice, you were already 20 hours and you still didn't have a single credit to your name. Writings, we co-rec that with our English comp course, but we're also playing around, if I can use that word, with a combined reading-writing co-rec, and some of our campuses are trying this out, and so both models seem to be working well for us. This is, just a visual, and then I'm going to turn it over. Just a visual of our remedial pathways. Sometimes it's easier for me just to see them, and you can see how they all line up. So the one that, again, I think needs the most work is the algebra calculus, because we still, we still have that O2, we still have 2 levels of math if you really start out low, but we had one below that. So the one we lopped off, there was one below O23. So we've made a little progress. And I'm going to turn it over to an expert, because I know very little about this than to help create the structure.
Several people have talked about, where they found resistance as far as when they were starting to try to roll out these models. And we've mentioned people like administration, faculty, and students. But what we found was really that as soon as the conversations really started, there really wasn't as much resistance as people thought that there was going to be. One of the things that I've shared is students really got it almost faster than anybody else did. Students would come in, and their initial reaction when you told them they were going to take a co-rec class might be, but I'm not very good in math, so why on earth would you put me in 2 math classes at the same time? This makes absolutely no sense to me. But if you sit down and you have a conversation with them and you say, I don't know if you really aren't very good in math or what has happened to put you where you feel you are in terms of your math skill set, but the whole idea behind having a support class is that you're going to get all the math that you need and all the support you need to learn the math you need. And when you start talking with them about what actually is going to occur in that support class, and the fact that the faculty are going to be laying down a foundation for them for future classes, they're going to be giving them an opportunity to ask questions, they're going to be reviewing all those kinds of things, then they'll say, okay, that makes sense to me. And the same thing is very true when we're talking with them about their English classes and their English composition. When you let them know that what we're going to be doing, the whole reason we're doing this is so that they don't take something one semester, then something else the second semester, and they've had an opportunity to not maybe remember everything they need to. I just have 2 slides here that really are snapshot slides to kind of share with you all where we are. This first one deals with our writing remediation. And the snapshots are from 2009 and fall 2014. And this has been alluded to many times, and I know already been shown in many ways. But for every 100 students who started in the remedial pathway in the fall of 2009, each one of those arrows coming out of the bucket shows where people are leaving the pathway, the path. And we lost over half of them before they even attempted a 100-level course. And by putting the students into these co-requisite classes, they're attempting the 100-level course, immediately. And then for the success in the 100-level course, approximately 37, and that was over a time frame of up to 3 years. So it wasn't necessarily that semester, then the subsequent semester. It was a pretty extended time frame. And to be really honest, we've been talking a lot about data. One of the reasons we pushed the time frame out is because the numbers were so bad. We thought, well, give them another year, maybe I'll look better. Give them another year, maybe I'll look better. And that was the best we could do. The other slide deals with basically the same visual, but it refers to our math remediation. Of every 100 students that entered in that fall 2009, we only had 29 of them successfully complete the 100 level course. And with our co-requisite model, with our quantitative reasoning class, we had 64 students out of every 100 successfully complete within that same semester. And so that was really significant. And I don't know anyone who hasn't spent a lot of time in developmental ed who doesn't always want to do better for the students that they're working for. And oftentimes in developmental ed, we say, put us out of business, put us out of business. We'd love to be put out of business. And this is a way to not necessarily put us out of business, but to give students what they need immediately.
So both Mary and Kathryn, quick question. So you actually have a strategy where you put on the calendar a date specific that you wanted to achieve scale, and then you had interim dates that set percentages. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and how that's worked in terms of putting that data on the calendar and getting people focused on implementing towards that objective.
Yeah, because we're statewide, it's a curse and a blessing. It's the problem with being statewide is communication. So we knew that in order to make this work, others have said this too, we had to get buy-in from a lot of different entities and constituencies. So I think it was about a 2.5-year timeline that was set up, and we were already starting into the mode of setting metrics for other activities, not just curricular activities at Ivy Tech. So I just laid it out the way we were starting to lay out other strategies. And I think we did a nicer job in academic affairs than the other areas, but that's just my personal opinion. And I got this out everywhere. It was presented to the board, it was presented to our chancellors, it was presented at faculty meetings. I went out to all 14 of my major regions, 24 campuses, 14 major regions, and personally delivered this in the fall to the faculty, did the update the following fall. So and the academic officers in each of the campuses did the same thing. We thought that people needed to have goals, and then we updated them on where they were on those goals. So all the regions get their data. They get their own data, and they get data from the state. So you know where you are in comparison to the state. And then my guru that we hired from Tennessee works with the regions that are really below where others are and tries to find out, what's going on so we can help you, because the goal is to get everyone, up to speed.
Great. So let's shift over to Casey. So Casey, you also had a statewide process, although with once again, a large number of institutions committing to scale on co-requisite. So tell us a little bit about how Colorado was able to move to the strategy you have today.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Colorado, we have a community college system office. We have 35 campuses that are part of 13 different colleges, and here's where they are in the state. So it's a huge geographic area. I think the state of Massachusetts would fit in Colorado 8 or 9 times, just to give you a sense if you haven't been out there. We set a goal for ourselves. We had a faculty group, 45 different people who, from the state, came in together and said, we need to accelerate students to reduce the amount of time, the number of developmental credits, and the number of courses in our sequence to get people to be successful in that college level class. And so, similar to Mary's process, this wasn't by accident. This was very much by design. I went out and talked to every president, to every campus, to all the different departments, lots of site visits all over the state, lots of faculty meetings, getting people kind of up to speed about what we were talking about. And what was really cool about our task force was that it grew. So it was an open meeting that happened once a month for 18 months to figure out where did we need to go and kind of where was our policy going to coalesce. And I've never been a part of a meeting before where you go from 45 to 80 people who regularly show up to these things because they understand that you're going to change something about their job and they really want to engage in the process. So we knew right up front that this was going to involve some curricular redesign, and we wanted to address reading, math, and English all in one shot. So in math, we moved to math pathways, that there was a really huge curricular effort. You heard a little bit from Dean about some of the efforts, but we really did go to what amount to a pathway to algebra, a pathway to liberal arts, math, or statistics, and a career and technical education pathway for students. So they really do need to talk about what's their plan of study. And this is so aligned with other initiatives that are going on in our state. We have a big push from the Department of Labor that talks about our pipeline and our sectors, and how do we get students to identify what their plans of study are, and a K-12 initiative kind of similar, individualized career and academic plans, and how do we get people to say, my major's going to be. And this really aligned well with the other work we were doing in Colorado. And then in CCR, that's our new prefix for what used to be English and reading. We integrated the disciplines, which Peter told me over breakfast was no small task, although in the scope of all the things we did, it was one of the things that I felt less stressed about, and moved to co-requisites for almost all of our students in the CCR pathway. In math, our old model had potentially 4 levels below college before you could get to a college-level math experience. And with the redesign, you pick one. So you're in a co-requisite experience that is with the college-level math, so you could be in the CTE math class concurrently with support. You could take a 1-semester standalone class that's a prep for CTE math or for quantitative literacy or statistics, or you could be in a course that's a preparation for algebra and then goes into college algebra. And I'm going to have Brandon tell you more about our CCR.
So before I get into some of the things we did with college composition and reading, our old model looked very similar to some of the ones you've already seen before earlier in the day. We had this really long pipeline of potentially 12 or more credits depending on where you tested. English and reading were taught separately, and as has already been established today, I mean, that was problematic for our students, right? We didn't necessarily have a success problem, we had a persistence problem because the pipeline was so long and we were losing so many students along the way. And so there were a handful of principles that really guided our conversations about what we were going to do with English and reading. And the first was that we had to shrink that pipeline. We had to mainstream as many students as we possibly could, or as we thought we reasonably could. Another principle was that we had to integrate reading and English, which just seemed to make sense, right? I mean, you don't often do those activities exclusive from one another. That's how they do it in K through 12. Why are we separating it at the college level? Why are we teaching reading and English separately? Because if you looked at the competencies for these courses, for reading courses, for English courses, and I did this. I put them on paper side by side with each other and highlighted the commonalities, and the whole page was green. We're all doing the same thing, so why aren't we doing all the same things together? But I think another important thing, especially on the English side that we tried to build in, but on math as well, was a recognition of the reasons why students fail in the first place, and that it's not all just about content. Peter mentioned non-cognitive issues earlier, and how many people are familiar with that kind of buzzword going around? Only if, okay. So non-cognitive or affective issues, these are the issues that come up. If you ask a professor, why do students fail? They don't often tell you about things that are related to content. They tell you about life factors or beliefs about learning or beliefs about themselves as learners. And we thought that it was very important to try to incorporate those things into these classes. It was really rethinking what the role of an instructor was in helping students to be successful. And so we knew we wanted to embed those in there as well. And so we have a few choices for a co-requisite remediation. We have a CCR 094 course, which is a course that is paired with college composition. And it's designed to support what is happening in the college composition course. So it's the closest aligned to ALP, really, that we have as a choice. But we also have what is known as a CCR 093 course, which is college composition and reading. But that is a course that is paired with another discipline course. It could be a psychology course. It could be a biology course. And so what that really is a disciplinary literacy class. How many people are familiar with that term? Okay, so it's and the old approach to teaching reading and even teaching writing to an extent was we are teaching them these universal, transferable reading and writing skills that can be used in any discipline. But we know that's not really the way it works. You don't read and write in a psychology class the way you read and write in a literature class. You don't read and write in a literature class the way you do in a biology class. And so is there really such a thing as a universal, transferable reading strategy that we can use in every discipline? Not really. And so institutions have a choice. They can choose to do the CCR 94 course paired with a college composition. They can choose to do the CCR 093 course that is paired with other discipline courses. They can do both. And I think in talking about issues of scale, I think that is one of the many things that we've been able to do that has helped us to be successful. And by the way, we are at full implementation now. There are no colleges in our system that can offer our old courses. In fact, our state faculty curriculum committee already voted to remove the old courses. You can't offer them, they don't exist anymore. It's like they never were even there. But I think that flexibility in choosing what is best for your institution and for your students, and there is also no one-size-fits-all mandate about how you have to run those classes. You're just told these classes need to support this course. And so based on your students' needs, based on your individual institutions, you need to decide what that looks like. You don't have to run an ALP model. You don't have to have 11 students in the class. You can have 22 students in the class. You don't have to pull from one section of the content course. You can pull from multiple sections of the content course. That's totally up to you. And this is about 55 to 60% of our developmental students that are testing into these classes. For students that test traditionally 2 levels below college level, and I still hate that term, but I'll use it, we have replaced what used to be 12 credits of English and reading with one standalone college composition and reading course that's 5 credits. And so it's still a college prep model, but they get through it much faster. They get through it in 1 semester and they're going into their college composition course. I'll share some data with you in a sec. There's a handout in your folder with some of our system-wide data on there. Some of the data I'm going to share with you now is from my institution exclusively, but it kind of mirrors what's going on system-wide. The success rate of the students in the corequisite course, in the college composition course, or in the college level course, for us is about 78%. Which is actually higher than the native students that test directly into the class. The success rate for our students that are in that still college prep model. Did I skip? Well, I'm going to get to the data. I'm going to get there. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to show them. I'll show them that. Don't worry. Okay. Where was I? Our success rate for the students that take the college prep is significantly lower. You'll see actually in the handout in your folder that it's about 38%. Because again, we don't have a success problem, we have you failed the quiz. We have a persistence problem, and so we're at the stage now where we have to ask, is there something we can do to get more of our students into the co-rec model because we know that they do much better in that particular model. So, some key steps to scale, I think, for us, and Casey had mentioned one of them earlier, and that is I think Colorado did a very good job in doing the redesign, where we had a top-down mandate, but we had a very bottom-up, faculty-driven process in designing the courses and what the curriculum was going to look like. And so we had we spent 18 months getting that faculty buy-in and really driving that conversation with faculty. Time's important, but you need to have a reasonable timeline to have a sufficient enough conversation, but you need to have a hard deadline. As someone mentioned earlier, faculty, especially English faculty, and I can say this because I am one, we fear change, and if you don't give us a deadline, we ain't never getting it done. You have got to tell us, and I work even with either self-imposed deadlines or externally imposed, I need that deadline. I am not going to do it if I don't have it. And so setting that firm, this is the date when we're going to really roll it out, it is very important. But that broad participation, everybody who had a stake in it was in on the conversation. Having that clear timeline and deadline, I think support at all levels, having a buy-in from administrators is important as well. And I can talk a lot more about that in the breakout session that we're going to have after lunch, because I want to be mindful of our time here. So if you see some of the data we have here, and math is on here as well, in our old baseline data for our old model, our college prep model, that old pipeline, From 2012, we had a little over 10,000 students, and 15% of them finished a gateway course in one semester. 34% of them completed in 1 year. In stark contrast to that, you can see that we have 85% of our students who are in the corequisite course who are completing their gateway course in one semester. That is a huge, huge, huge difference. And it shows us that we were right, and one of our other kind of defining principles of this redesign was set the bar high for your students. And if you give them the support they need, they're going to reach up and they're going to grab that bar. We believe in that Pygmalion effect. If you set high standards, people are going to meet those standards. If you set low standards, they're going to internalize that and think that that's all that they're capable of. So you get them in that college level class, they feel much more empowered, and so it works out better for them. Math, you want to say anything about math?
I think in math, in our redesign, we were really challenged because when we started the process, we didn't have Tristan's data yet, and we didn't have Sarah's data yet, and so it was really hard to talk to faculty about, we're pretty sure this is going to work, but we don't have data to speak to if it's going to work or not, because we were, back in 2011 when we started this process, really trying to figure it out. And so when we had Peter come talk to us and he already had data, it was a lot easier for the CCR group to say, let's get on board and let's do this. It was harder for the math faculty. So what we saw in the structure is that we created a structure where corequisite was absolutely possible, but not something that was forced as much as it was on the CCR side. And I think that's really holding out in our data, that what we see is where we have the remedial course followed by a gateway course. Our gateway and 1 year completion rates are much better than they were historically, but we can for sure do better than 17%. I was talking to a math faculty this morning who was like, we're moving to corequisite, Casey. I get it. We've seen the data. It's really holding out. So our college is going that direction. But I think it was about creating the structure so that we can move in that direction, and then continuing to show people, look how good the English departments are doing. Let's really look at this data and try to replicate it across student populations. And we know now, with the help of Tennessee and West Virginia, that it's totally possible.
Yeah, and so Casey, I did want to follow up on that, because I mean, of course, we also heard from Dean this morning about the math pathway and the challenge you had with the college algebra question, right? Where you still had a lot of your community colleges channeling students through college algebra, really primarily.
Yeah.
So do you feel like with the new pathways and their definition, that's going to enable you to really move the needle on the COREC as well, because you're going to get more folks in the COREC or into the other pathways? I mean, tell me about how you're seeing that.
It'll definitely help. So part of the challenge is those math agnostic people who Tristan talked about earlier this morning. So to have our English discipline, if you're an English major, and to say, oh, we'll accept any math class, that doesn't help us advise students into something. And the math pathways on the 4-year side really does help further the conversation for our 2-year schools about, okay, let's make sure students are in the right pathway. So we have the right structure. We don't need more policy in that space. But what we really need is a lot more of a push so that we can bring students into the areas where they most need the support.
Mm-hmm. So Kathryn, both of you, as you mentioned, have very large systems. You have lots of campuses, lots of institutions, as opposed to, you know, like Chancellor talked about the small size. So you had a monumental task ahead of you in terms of that. So tell me a little bit more about, for those states here that do have similar size, what's key to be able to really get folks to commit to this at scale across the entire state?
Well, I think that, you know, we say it over and over and over again, but the conversations have to take place, and they have to take place when you are part of a large system in multiple ways. You know, we have gotten, I hope, better and better at, you know, you can't always just meet face to face, but whether it's, you know, through an electronic meeting system or through phone or through email. We've tried to use, you know, our learning management system. We've tried to use orgs and post things and post questions. Sometimes those things get heavily utilized, sometimes they don't, but at least people have an opportunity to have those conversations. And I think also we're a large system, But within that large system, there's a lot of variation. We have some campuses, individual campuses that are very, very large. We have some campuses that are very, very small, and the small campuses would say, well, this is going to be difficult for me because of these issues. The large campuses, I mean, we had a variety of issues, and so back to the blessing and the curse idea, we could see what some of the challenges were going to be for the large campuses. For example, capacity. We've kind of done, I think we've all sort of modified the system a little bit. We do have in our co-requisite classes students who come into the college ready, and we have students who are in the co-rec, but we cap the co-recs at like 15. One of the first things we figured out is we needed a whole lot more sections of the 100 level course. And when you already have a large campus that is using its buildings close to capacity, that becomes very challenging. When are you going to schedule this? How are you going to schedule this? Where are you going to put these? How many more teachers do we have to recruit and find? And so those were some of the things that our large campuses dealt with. On the flip side of that, the small campuses would say, well, what happens if I don't get enough students? I mean, what if I only have 4 or 5 students available at this time frame? How are we going to support that and make sure that we run, at least right out of the gate when we're trying to figure this out, some of these courses with lower caps on them where previously they wouldn't. So the communication is key, and the conversation. I think a lot of respect among the people that we're working with. One of the advantages of being statewide is that we've always had statewide curriculum committee meetings, so a lot of faculty knew one another around the state and felt that they could call on one another to say, I thought I had this all ready to go, and now I'm facing this, and what are your thoughts on this? And so lots of conversation. Just, it's very challenging to roll something in this large of a system with this much diversity within a system, I think.
Just real quickly, and I don't think this has come out yet, but one thing that almost killed us, and I didn't anticipate it, was that some of the chancellors and presidents, although they understood what we were doing, didn't realize that there was going to be an initial loss of enrollment. I mean, just think about this. We had students enrolled in 5 credit-hour math classes multiple times, and those people were gone. And they wanted to know what was happening, right? Okay, we're supposed to be focused on completion, but there's still this, but I have to be financially viable. So we had to do a good job of doing some projections about if these students stay in, and with the state funding formula and just putting all those things together, that it really was a financially better model for the regions. But wow, that hit me hard because I wasn't anticipating that. So if I can share, if I can save you that grief, I would say, be ready for that argument from some folks that are not maybe as close to it as you all.